Good morning, champion, and thank you for tuning in to WDRB Media, the voice of the community, the only station giving you double the information and inspiration. You're listening to The Mike James Show, where we laugh, we grieve, and we live on purpose.
Good morning, champions. It's your host, Coach Mike J, and I am so glad to pour some more insight into you using our 3D value platform. Those of you who may not be familiar with what those 3Ds stand for, it's simply spirit, soul, and body. And I've made my mission as the CEO of 3D Value to make sure that whenever I'm sharing insights or doing what I'm doing, that I'm doing something that's going to be beneficial for people's spiritual health, their emotional health, and their mental health. Today's show is entitled Time Strategies 101. For those of you who followed me, you know that from time to time I love using the book of Genesis as a springboard for so many life applications and wisdom. And that's what I plan to do with today's show, Time Strategies 101. We're going to look at what our Father, when we refer to him as creator, the Hebrew word is Elohim. We're going to look at how Elohim not manages time, but how he prioritizes, how he sets out what you might refer to as a to-do list when we look at Genesis, the first chapter. But I want to give you some practical life application tips on how you can get more out of your day, out of your life, out of your week, out of your time by looking at some of the strategies we see God used right here in Genesis chapter 1. The sponsor for today's show is none other than the 3D Value Company. For those of you who are listening to in Radio Land, you can also follow 3D Value on TikTok, Fanbase, LinkedIn, IG, and Facebook. If you want to keep up with what we're doing throughout the week, keep yourself motivated. I think today's going to be a great show. Can't wait to jump into each of these. Today's 5 points are: number one, some tasks are projects and not merely realistic to accomplish in one day. Point number two, focus on one thing. The whole idea of less is more can really be realized when you focus on one thing. Point number three, create periods of work and periods of rest. Point number four, identify the spaces that need to be filled. And then point number five, to-do list versus to-don't list. Point number one, some tasks are projects and not merely realistic to accomplish in one day. I'll never forget this book called Getting Things Done. And David Allen was the author. I'll put that information on the screen so that you can place your order today. You know, that book really changed my philosophy, my perspective on how I go about accomplishing things, how I go about getting through my day. And one of the first things that David Allen says in his book, Getting Things Done, is that we need to, first of all, brain dump. There's so many things from time to time that are grabbing for our attention. And if we're not careful, if we're not making progress towards the things that are in our brain, it's actually a form of creating this crazy cycle. You're creating tension in your brain. You're creating unnecessary stress because there are so many things screaming for your attention, but you've not identified them, number one. And here's the second thing David Allen says, that some things that we want to accomplish, they are not just like as simple as going to the grocery store. I need to go get grapes. Okay, scratch it off the list, done. No, David Allen says there are actually some things that are on our brain that are projects, that there are a series of steps to accomplishing it. It's not as simple as getting in the car and going to get grapes. It could be for something on your list of things to accomplish. It could be starting a school. Well, you can't just knock that out on one day, right? And so point one today is we need to differentiate the things that are just a simple task we could cross off our to-do list versus what are the things that require more than just one day. What are some things that are going to be a project? You're not going to complete it until a series of weeks or months where there's multiple steps in it. Go ahead and differentiate that. Put it on a paper. Have you a to-do list where I can just mark this off. I can do this in a day versus here's a list of things that are a series. It's going to require weeks, perhaps months, perhaps quarters, maybe perhaps years. Just you accepting the fact that some things are going to require a more lengthier amount of time, what it does is it helps you set realistic goals. Now you don't have to stress so hard because now we're not trying to do it all in one day. Look at the wisdom here in Genesis. It says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And check this out. Here's just day one. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. Period. as our younger generation might say, purr. Hey, check this out. Did you see the wisdom in that? Although we know God took 6 days to create the earth, and then on the seventh day he rested, on day one, his agenda was not to do day 1 through 6 worth of work on day one. His goal on day one was just to manifest light. And this is not the S-U-N light, because those lights don't appear until day 4. This is the glory of God, the beauty of who God really is. He really commands himself into existence. I want you to just meditate on the value and the wisdom that could come to you if you were to do less. Some tasks are not going to be doable in one day. Some things really are projects. Some things will take more time to accomplish. As we go into our second point, I want you to ask yourself, what is my focus for today? So point 2 says focus on one thing. In parentheses, I've got less is more. You know, I know what it's like to sometimes have a quantity approach versus a quality approach. We see this in our day-to-day life. Sometimes we may focus on how many things can I get done today. And there seems to be a sense of accomplishment if you can get 30 and 40 things done. But not everything yields the same amount of energy. For instance, if it's been said like this, there are 20% of the things you do that can give you 80% results. Samuel Chan, in his books on leadership, has mentioned that in organizations, 80% of the things that we are often focusing our attention and time on only yield us 20%. And in organizations, 20% of the people are usually doing 80% of the work. What is the principle and the wisdom here? Less is more. And you have, through prayer, have to find out, what are the things that I could do today? What's the 20% that I could do today that would yield me 80% results? There is such a power when we shrink down our attention, shrink down our focus. Less. Not everyone needs our attention. Not everyone needs our time. Some people want your time, but that is not necessarily the best place to sow your time. Our goal in this season of our life should be to ask the Holy Spirit, show me the 20%, 20% of people, 20% of the tasks that really need my time. Show me, Holy Spirit, where should my focus really be? And I believe that if we pray that prayer, we'll find ourselves being more strategic with the one thing God has told us to do today. What's the one thing that you could accomplish today that would give you the biggest result? What about in your health? What's the one meal you could be eating today that would give you the best return on energy, because food was designed to be energy? What about in your relationship, in your marriage, and with your significant other? Out of all the different love languages out here, which one of those languages means the most to your partner? If you spoke to them in this way today, and not necessarily verbally, but what one thing could you do? Could you show? What's one place you guys could go that you know if we went here, man, it would just be the highlight of our day, perhaps even the highlight of our week, maybe even the highlight of your month. This principle can be applied in so many different areas of your life. If you're in school, if you're aware of the test that's coming up, what is the 20% of the material on the test that if I knew that, it would impact my grade 80% and above? Not everything is always important. There's usually just one thing that if we find it, we will get greater results if we laser focus in on the one thing. I'm going to ask you one more time. What is your one thing you're going to focus on today? What's going to be your one thing you're going to focus on this week? What's going to be your single focus for your family this quarter of the year? If everything's important, nothing's important. We've got to find ways to go small, because small really is the new big. So far I've given you 2 points as we look here at the wisdom we see in the first chapter of Genesis. Our creator Elohim, he doesn't try to do 6 days of work in one day. He's got this whole project of creation broken down. And day one, the focus was just light. My second point to you is, what's your one thing? What are you focusing on today? Point number 3, create periods of work and create periods or spaces of rest. This is probably by far my favorite nugget of today. Listen, when I look at Genesis chapter 1, this opening chapter, it's so clear that God is not just working all the time. Once again, if you think about that first couple of verses that I just read, when God looked at what he did for the day, he said, "It is good." And he was done. That was the end of that day. Here's been my challenge, and maybe yours. Sometimes I've had trouble ending my day and entering into a rest. Why is that? I think it could be a form of greed. I'm just being honest. I like to be transparent because we grow as we are honest with each other. If we put on facades and act like we don't do some of these things, people don't grow in relationships when we're not transparent. So I think sometimes I can be so eager to create, to accomplish, to get to the next step. I've got this vision in my mind of what it looks like. I want to build it. And sometimes in the anticipation and excitement of what I want to create, I forget to just appreciate what I've already done, appreciate what God's already allowed me to do today, and rest. I want to pause here because I want to ask you, in what ways are you avoiding periods of rest, which could be periods of reflection? And there's benefit in rest. Number one, when you're resting, it gives your mind a chance to look back on what has happened. God looks at light and he says it's good. How are you taking time on a daily to look at the things you are accomplishing? If you did have a to-do list and you accomplished something on that list, when do you take time to mark off what you accomplished? You know what I've noticed? My self-esteem grows, my self-image grows when I focus on the wins God's already blessed me to have. I've also noticed this: when I'm not focusing on my bag, my blessings, and my gifts, when I'm not focusing on those, my brain has a tendency to think I haven't accomplished anything. What about you? Sometimes we compare ourselves, and especially in this day of social media and everyone's life is on instant display. You could have been happy with the things you've done, but by the time you look at maybe what someone else has done and it looks like they've done more, somewhere in our psyche, you begin to compare, and comparison can be the thief of joy. All of a sudden you were excited about what you've done, but now it's not good enough. I'm challenging you here as we look at our Father, our Elohim. It's not just about what he can accomplish. He created light, and then he takes time to look at what he's done and says it's good. I'm going to ask you again, what are you saying to yourself about the wins you've previously had? What about the time you graduated from college, high school, got your GED? What about the time you went in for that job interview with your head up high after being told no positions available, and then finally you got that opportunity? What about the time when you came through for a family member? What about the time where you were instrumental in helping resolve a conflict? If you go back down memory lane, there are so many things you've already been good at, God's blessed you to be a part of. And I need you to reflect on that, because when we take time to enter into periods of rest and gratitude and be thankful in our life, it improves our overall health. Not only that, but when your body rests, it begins to heal itself. Emotionally, we can be healed when we rest and we stop engaging in toils and conflict and strife in our lives. Rest can be beneficial spiritually, emotionally, and physically. And so you've got to create periods of rest in your life so that you can heal. My friend, point number 4 today, identify the spaces that need to be filled. So we're talking about space, right? Our last point was create spaces of work or periods of work. This is what God does. He created periods of work. He's working on day 1 to create light, then he rests. But if we go on down at the order of creation, this is what I like about the space. God creates a space between the waters below and the waters above. And this space is called the firmament, heaven's atmosphere, where the birds fly. Okay? And so this space is very needful because God could not put birds there if there wasn't this period of space. I have a coaching question for you here. How have you been identifying spaces in your life that need to be filled? You see, in our world, we may not be trying to fill a firmament with birds, but maybe there's space in your life for a recreational space where you could be working out more. Have you created space in your schedule? When does that happen? Hey, check this out. Maybe you don't have a recreational goal, but maybe you've had a romantic goal where you want to be in love. How have you created space to get to know other people? You know, I'll never forget my boo, Corn, and I were talking about some goals that I had with 3D Value. And she said, babe, do you really have space in your schedule for the things you're telling me that you're praying about? And man, when she said that, it kind of felt like the heavens opened, like I knew that was a God question. I was like, wow. And so what I had to realize is I'm praying for God to do something in my life. I'm praying for him to fill a space that I've not created. And so what I had to do is be honest with myself and look at all of the demands that are on me, looking at all the ways that I have to show up in life to be available. And I had to make a decision. I realized I don't have space. Guys, I hope you're hearing the wisdom in this nugget right here. Something you are praying for, God really does want to give you, but you've got to create space for it. If you want a spouse, is there space in your schedule for a spouse? How would you make time for someone that you say you want to love on if you don't have time? You've got to create it. So look at your calendar. What can you be doing now? Are there apps you could download? Is there space maybe once a week on the weekend where you can create some strategic time to develop a friendship, to develop a bond? We've got to create space for the things we say we want. Check this out. What about family time? If you want to strengthen the bonds in your family, how are you creating space to show the people in your home or in your extended family that they matter? When does that happen? Is it weekly? Is it monthly? Is it daily? You know, we got to get specific. Specificity helps bring what's in the heavens of our mind into the earth's realm. I hope this is blessing you. What about the quality of your marriage? If you got to create space on your calendar for date night, creating space in your weekly routine for fun, spontaneity, you've got to create room for it. Everything needs a space. Even you and I, the space we occupy right now, God created this space for you and I. What is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man that you visit him? God created space for you and I to be here right now. You're here because God had forethought about you and he created space for you. If you are going to create some spaces in your life for things you're praying for, you've got to be very intentional. Okay. Last but not least, we can create space for strategic planning towards goals. There are times, usually at night, where I get out my journal and I just start writing and I think about 3D value. I think about what it is right now. Think about my mission statement, my vision statement, and then I'm making strategic time to talk with experts in my field about what would the next level look like for me as a CEO in my company. I have to be strategic about that. Nothing just happens. And so for whatever area I've mentioned so far that you want to grow in, relationships, recreation, family time, date night, strategic planning towards goals, reflecting about what happened in your day, you've got to be strategic enough to create space for God to speak to you in those areas of your life. I hope this is blessing you. Hey, today's topic is Time Strategies 101. So far, I've been sharing with you some nuggets, wisdom that I've been getting from reading Genesis, the first chapter, thinking of God as a creator, Elohim, seeing how he created the earth and how he didn't try to do it all in one day. That was point one. Realizing that some tasks are actually projects and they require more time. It's unrealistic. It's not a SMART goal if we try to accomplish some things that require 6 days in one day. Point number two, I've shown you the value of focusing on one thing. For God's Elohim, his one thing on day one was light. And you got to figure out each day what's going to be your one thing. Point number three, you've got to create periods to rest. You can't just work. That's actually not honoring the Sabbath like God told us. Remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. When you and I work, and we don't create periods to just reflect and rest, we're actually breaking the Sabbath. Our bodies will respond to it and judge us. Sickness, compromised immune systems, ungrateful, depression, oppression. Some of these things are actually a result of the fact that we work too much and we have not entered into a period and space of rest. Point number four, you've got to identify the spaces that need to be filled. This is Matthew, the 12th chapter, verse 43. When the unclean spirit is gone out of a man, he walketh through dry places, seeking rest, and findeth none. Verse 44. Then he saith, I will return into my house, from whence I came out, and when he is come, he findeth it empty, swept and garnished. 45. Then goeth he, and taketh with himself 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter in and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first. Now, I picked this scripture because we see a principle here that when an evil spirit leaves a place, there is an empty space. And when the evil spirit returns, the place is being swept clean. However, the space is not filled. So notice this evil spirit goes out and gathers 7 other spirits more evil. Why? Because the concept is empty spaces must be filled. Now, we don't have time to go into a lengthy discourse about this point, but I wanted to ask you, what if we treated or looked at your schedule as a place that's either being occupied or not occupied? In other words, check this out. When you begin your day, one way to protect your time and to protect your energy is to not just have an empty space. If someone asks you, hey, what do you got going on today? Be ready to share where your time is going, because here's the principle. If you can fill the space, not any and everything can come in it. You see, this evil spirit could not have entered back into the house with all of his other demon cousins had the house been filled. And sometimes we invite chaos into our life, relational chaos. Sometimes we are hooked up with the wrong knuckleheads and the wrong kinds of people because they don't sense there's somebody home. And so chaos can often come into our life because there's no clear vision about where we're going. Okay. When you don't have a to-don't list, not a to-do list, but when you don't have a to-don't list, we can end up doing the very things that steal our time, steal our attention. You said you were going to go back to school, but the next step is to send in reference letters per se, right? Well, if you're not careful, you might find yourself scrolling on social media because there's no goal, there's no plan, and we fill spaces in our life with chaos when we don't have a clear plan. What about you, my friend? What is in front of you right now? What are the things that you need to accomplish today? Make a list of that. On the other side of that paper, I want you to write a list of things that you don't need to do. Okay? You've got to have clear vision in this season of your life. If you're going to do A, you got to say yes to that, and you got to say no to the things that are anti what you said you wanted to accomplish. If you really want love and there's a certain value system you want your marriage to be based on, stop entertaining people who don't have the same core values as you. Every yes is pregnant with a no. If I say yes to a certain quality of love life, I have to say no to dysfunction. If I say yes to getting this done today, I have to say no to every distraction that is going to fight against or compete against what I've made my priority. We're talking about time strategies 101. It's what we say yes to sometimes that is pregnant with a no. Every yes is pregnant with a no. Every no is pregnant with a yes. We have to just tell some things and some people no, because what we're building is so precious. And if we don't learn to value our time, be clear about what we can do, be clear about what we cannot do, we'll find ourselves moving in cycles and circles, still not any closer to our goals and dreams. I pray this has been a blessing to you. If you're interested in how you can get more access to some of the information that you've heard today, I want you to reach out to me at linkapp.com/Mike James. If you're interested in how you can be a guest on the Mike James Show, also same website there. And I look forward to connecting with you. Until next time, discover, develop, and deploy.
Thank you for tuning in to WDRB Media, the voice of the community, the only station giving you double the information and inspiration. You're listening to The Mike James Show, where we laugh, we live on purpose.
I'll add some value. I'll spread some sunshine your way. It's a beautiful day, and we'll eat so healthy as we take our vitamins today. His name is Mike James, and he adds 3D value. So listen as he talks to you.
God, I thought I had this figured out. Everything I thought I knew, I don't know.
Take a seat in the corner, I don't know. Make yourself